This podcast is made possible by you, the supporters of WPLN and WNXP, Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's March 25th, 2025. On this day in 1993, Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's, earned his GED. He didn't really need to for any practical reason. This was nearly 24 years after founding the fast food chain, and by that point it was a national fixture. But through those years, he'd been asked a number of times to talk to students, and he felt like a hypocrite telling them about how important it was to get an education, knowing that he was a high school dropout. Thomas probably could have just taken a test and gotten the diploma in the mail, but he did it at a high school in Florida so that he could graduate for real, and his classmates, if you want to call them that, voted him most likely to succeed. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with some historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. That decision that Dave Thomas made to go back and get a diploma really speaks to how important education and educational achievements are. I think we all know that both the material that you learn and the degrees or certificates that are earned really can have a major impact on a person's life or career path. And as much as you may argue that certain lines of work don't really need college, which is true, there certainly are many other kinds of jobs that do require a high school diploma, a bachelor's, if not an advanced degree. And if a kid just isn't on a path towards finishing high school, college ready, or even just finishing, that kid will never get to decide for themselves what it is they want to do. That's just a simple fact. And it almost seems silly to cite a source for this, but the data bears it out. Is not just one of those pieces of conventional wisdom that only seems true because it's repeated so often. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics have shown year after year that education pays off, literally. The fastest growing career fields in the most recent analysis are the kind that need a formal education, like medical and health services. Creating more access in order to create more opportunity has driven so much of educational reform since the beginning of the push for public schools in Tennessee back in the 19th century. Making schooling available to white families who couldn't afford a private academy came first, then to black folks. Making sure that there were opportunities all the way through high school level in counties across the state was a really big and complicated move forward. Establishing requirements that families send their kids to school and minimum ages for dropping out. Ensuring that kids of all races and economic backgrounds have good schools that don't pigeonhole anyone or push a particular group towards lower paying jobs. The overriding thought that developed through the years is that it is a good thing to build opportunities for the people who grow up here. And along with that has come a refrain, repeated through the generations, that the community benefits when its residents are knowledgeable and when kids are challenged to learn and be their best. A couple of things going on in the state now buck that long-standing trend. There are, of course, the measures moving forward in the state legislature to withhold education from undocumented students. That's coming up in a Senate committee today. If the state does adopt one of these laws, it would be a direct contradiction of a Supreme Court decision from the early 1980s. That ruling made the point that any child who's likely to grow up and stay in the state is going to become part of the state's economy, regardless of their immigration status. So whatever the legality of their parents' actions in bringing the family here, they're here now and having an impact just by their presence. That ruling said it's in the state's best interest to make sure those kids are educated. This is also one of the ideas at the heart of the concern over Tennessee's relatively new threats of mass violence law. That's the one that WPLN's Paige Flager has been reporting on that's used to punish kids who say things that could be perceived as a threat, even if circumstances make it pretty clear the child was just joking or mouthing off. A lot of the children caught up by this law are being expelled at a pretty young age. That can put them on a more limited track for the rest of their education. It's essentially deciding that because they made a bad choice of wording as a, say, 11-year-old, the rest of their life options will be limited. I think I'll just finish up this part of the episode by reading directly from our state's Constitution. I should say that document is a mess in some places. It was written in 1876. Stuff like noxious racism was baked in. We have rightfully amended it many times to clean that stuff up. And this section is one that we've definitely clarified and simplified, but some of the original language put things really well. Article 11, Section 12 says this: knowledge, learning, and virtue being essential to the preservation of Republican institutions and the diffusion of the opportunities and advantages of education throughout the different portions of the state, being highly conducive to the promotion of this end, it shall be the duty of the General Assembly in all future periods of this government to cherish literature and science. Or, as that section of our Constitution now says, the state of Tennessee recognizes the inherent value of education and encourages its support. In just a few minutes, President Trump's tariffs are being felt in our region in ways you may not have thought of. That's coming up after the newscast.
We know that local government isn't the only part of your life.
Like the mayor, I know that city government isn't the only thing you're concerned with.
We are still struggling to find affordable housing.
Particularly at this bus stop.
That's one of the unique challenges with my business.
I'm WPLN's Metro reporter Cynthia Abrams. I'm working to break down topics like transit, housing, and local government to make sure that when you are thinking about Metro, you're getting the full story. Follow my latest stories at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Since President Donald Trump took office in January, Immigration and Customs Enforcement has arrested 69 undocumented people who were being held at the Davidson County Jail. That's more than 4 times the number of arrests during the same period last year. The people arrested by ICE had different reasons for ending up in jail. Around 2 dozen had been charged with a violent offense, such as assault, but the Nashville Banner reports some of those cases are more complicated than they seem. One was arrested for assaulting a man who had been domestically abusing her. Others had been arrested for driving under the influence or for minor offenses, such as public intoxication or driving without a license. Many had their charges dropped and would have gone home if ICE had not picked them up from the jail. The state of Tennessee recently issued a report on the number of undocumented immigrants arrested here in recent months. But a closer look at some of the cases raises questions about how that report was compiled and how reliable the data is. After noting that the state report is light on details, the Chattanooga Times-Free Press compared the portion relating to Hamilton County to data on the forms submitted to the state by that county, and all that accounted for 144 arrests between October and December of last year. It found problems that suggest some people who had paperwork proving their legal status were not allowed to access those documents at booking. The Sheriff's Department improperly marked them as undocumented. In at least one case, a man was marked with that status even after showing multiple items, including his authorization to work in the U.S. Local law enforcement are not trained to determine immigration status, and experts point out that the state law requiring the arrest report inadequately defines what qualifies as an unlawful presence in the state. It lists visas that people may have, but leaves out some that are very common. Even with those fundamental problems, the state's report does not bear out claims that people in the country illegally are more likely to commit crimes. Arrests related to incidents like robbery, assault, or drug-related crimes did not outpace the general public, and more than half of the arrests were related to driving infractions. A new fiscal report shows that Nashville's eviction right to counsel program has provided relief to the city's finances. Program leaders say that if this were fully funded, the city could get a 5-to-1 return on their spending. The Eviction Right to Counsel program provides legal services to low-income households facing an eviction. It offers legal advice as well as full representation in court. The program has been operating as a pilot funded by pandemic relief dollars. Now, leaders are pointing to the report as evidence that continuing the program could have big payoffs. The report estimates that it would cost around $9 million to fund annually, and that the city could see savings upwards of $33 million, if not more. These savings come from things like reducing homelessness rates, preventing costly jail stays, and keeping students enrolled in school. For someone who is unhoused, learning who to trust can be key to survival. That's what WPLN's This Is Nashville is examining today in its latest show. Danielle, who has lived in 2 large local encampments, says there are layers of trust inside as well as outside of her homeless community.
When it comes to homeless camps within the community, it's eat or be eaten. But when it comes to outsiders, you stick with your own. They will stick by your side. They're not going to throw you to the wolves.
You can hear more from Danielle and other encampment residents coming up at noon in the latest in the In My Place series on This Is Nashville. We'll still need to get your real ID, but just can't find the time to stand in line. You can now take care of it on Saturdays at driver services centers across the state. Beginning May 7th, all Tennesseans over the age of 18 will be required to have a real ID to fly domestically or to enter certain federal buildings, military bases, and nuclear power plants. You can still use a current passport. Getting a real ID is optional. You don't need it to drive, to vote, purchase alcohol or cigarettes, or receive Social Security or veterans benefits, but it's just one extra layer of security. And if you do want it, you'll have to bring along your birth certificate, Social Security card, and 2 documents proving your state of residence. Just search online for Tennessee Real ID centers for that list. One of the Nashville Zoo's most high-profile conservation efforts involves big cats who are notoriously hard to breed. Clouded leopards. WPLN health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us the veterinary staff is caring for the 44th cub born at the facility.
Bottle feeding a baby leopard is no easy feat.
Oh, you got it.
The cub might have trouble latching or could have a full stomach and need to go to the bathroom. This one, who isn't named yet, tends to be particular about which of the carnivore keepers is holding the bottle. Sometimes that's Heather Schwartz, Nashville Zoo's veterinary services director.
It's really just all hands on deck, literally around the clock care. It's just like having a newborn at home, a new human baby.
There are some differences. The care team has to basically quarantine the cub, so her mom doesn't neglect or hurt her. Another difference, there's a big audience. Onlookers shoot pictures and videos while the staff cares for her in a hospital room with a wide public viewing window. Schwartz has been the vet here for generations of cats. That came in handy during prenatal care for this cub's mother, Niren.
And Niren I raised as a little baby, so she's very comfortable with me. She allowed me to sit in with her and put an ultrasound probe on her while she drank goat's milk.
Soon, this cub will be paired up with a male. Unlike wild leopards, who are solitary, Nashvilles live as couples. And with any luck, she'll add another cub into the species survival program in a few years. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
The newest clouded leopard cub does not have a name yet. The zoo's using an election to name her, and you can find a link with this story on our website. Researchers at Mammoth Cave National Park have unearthed a new-to-science ancient shark species that they say was hiding in plain sight. Derek Parham with our partner station WKYU has this report.
The remains of Clavocidens mcginnissi, or McGinnis's nail tooth, tell us the shark only measured around 3 to 4 inches in length, earning it the popular nickname of the chipmunk shark. Around 340 million years ago, southern Kentucky was covered by a warm, shallow sea, home to countless species of ancient corals, invertebrates, and sharks. Cave specialist Rick Toomey says the shark's namesake, David McGinnis, is a retired Mammoth Cave guide, a national park superintendent, and a lifelong advocate for historic preservation.
And throughout his career, pushed for recognition that fossils were an important resource that the Park Service was protecting.
The discovery is the latest in the park's paleontological resource inventory, an ongoing study to uncover the ancient species that once ruled the Bluegrass State. I'm Derek Parham in Bowling Green.
Well, if you're wondering why your car is so filthy lately, blame it on Texas and Oklahoma. According to WSMV, recent stormy weather blew in large amounts of dust and dirt from our neighboring states. They're both experiencing dry conditions. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. The impacts of President Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs are being felt even on metal made domestically. In Kentucky, aluminum from Canada was one of the state's biggest imports last year. Justin Hicks reports some businesses hope rising prices will be offset by a competitive edge against imports.
Here in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, this small company makes something pretty unique: wrestling rings and cages for mixed martial arts fights. Monster Rings and Cages has made countless fighting rings for movies and even Madison Square Garden. And each of these arenas requires a good bit of steel.
That's the sound of industry.
Mike Samples shows me around the metal shop where they cut and weld thick steel posts that go on the corners of the rings.
We bring it in, cut here on this saw. We have another little saw over there, et cetera, et cetera.
And Samples is a proud made in the USA kind of guy. He gets as much steel from U.S. suppliers as he can.
Boxing and MMA industry, too, you have a lot of ex-military people, and they certainly are happy to see made in the USA.
Now, you would expect tariffs on imported metal would just raise the prices of imported metal. But Samples says the price of his American-made steel is going up, too. For him, prices have gone up from about 60 cents a pound to 75 cents. That's about a 20% increase, which, by the way, is pretty close to the 25% hike on imported steel and aluminum. Samples believes paying a little more is worth it, especially if it can help him compete against foreign companies. Just this morning, he noticed one Chinese supplier who makes a cheaper fighting ring raising prices nearly in line with his.
And now we're taking some bad tasting medicine that will eventually make us all good, That's my hope.
Tariffs are affecting domestic aluminum prices, too. Take Deborah Dudley. She owns Oscar Ware in Bonneville, a small family company that makes grill accessories. She also hopes tariffs will give her a competitive edge against cheaper Chinese copies.
We've had a lot of competitive knockoffs of everything we've done basically coming in from China, and I can't compete with that.
So good news, right? But Dudley says her supplier told her next time she orders some of that U.S.-made aluminum, prices are going to be higher.
And I'm asking why. I would love someone to answer that question.
Yeah, it ultimately comes down to competition, right?
That's Clark Packard, a researcher at the Cato Institute. He says U.S. metal makers are raising prices more or less because they can.
By raising prices of foreign steel and aluminum through tariffs, domestic producers are given sort of a green light to raise their own prices.
Packard says the rise in prices is especially weird because demand is pretty low. The biggest users of raw metal are the automotive and construction industries, and they're waiting for market uncertainty and high borrowing costs to cool down.
And so prices should, in theory, be falling, but because of this added protectionism, it's unfortunate, but not really surprising.
And Packard has heard the argument that folks like Mike Samples have made. Maybe this will be a brief moment of pain that ushers in a new golden era of manufacturing. But he's skeptical of that.
It makes it really hard to invest when it's so uncertain. And historically, the economics don't back up that idea.
Back at the boxing ring factory, Mike Samples says he supports President Trump's attempts to use tariffs to bring back manufacturing. And if it doesn't pay off, he'll have to wrestle with whatever comes next.
Days when I think, maybe I should just retire and forget it. And then I remember, well, there's 9 or 10 families depending on me.
I'm Justin Hicks in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky.
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville and regional news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.